All right, let's jump right in. Today, we are tracing the absolutely incredible life of Al-Bara ibn Azib. We're going to draw directly from some really rich historical accounts to unpack the journey of, honestly, an absolute hero. We're going to witness this remarkable transformation, seeing how a passionate youth, forged in the very fires of early Islamic history, grew into a formidable warrior and then, ultimately, a foundational scholar of the faith. We've got a fascinating life story to cover in this explainer today, so let's get right to it.
So you have to ask yourself, how exactly does a boy rejected for his youth become an absolute legend? I mean, just picture the emotional stakes here. It's the eve of the momentous Battle of Badr. The atmosphere is incredibly tense, and the stakes are quite literally survival. And right in the middle of all this is a 14-year-old boy. He's full of this fiery zeal, totally desperate to prove himself, stepping forward to stand with the men. But he's turned away. He's simply too young. Now that burning disappointment, that tearful rejection, that could have easily extinguished the fire of any ordinary kid. But, as you'll see, Al-Bara ibn Azib was definitely not an ordinary youth.
Okay, let's dive right into this timeline. At age 14, like we just said, he faces that crushing rejection at Badr. But fast forward just 1 year later, and his persistence pays off big time. He's officially accepted to stand shoulder to shoulder with the seasoned warriors at the grueling Battle of Khandaq, also known as the Trench. So he transitions rapidly from an eager, sidelined youth to a recognized defender. But what makes his life truly extraordinary is actually the final chapter. Decades later, moving past the age of 50, after a literal lifetime of military campaigns, he doesn't just retire. No, he settles in the city of Kufa, completely transforming into a wise, revered scholar, and starts teaching the very history he helped create.
I mean, just listen to the raw emotion captured in his own words here. He recounts, "The messenger of Allah considered me too young on the day of Badr, I and Ibn Omar, so he sent us back." You know, you can almost still hear the lingering sting of that memory, right? It's this direct, first-hand account that acts almost like a time machine for us. It puts us right there in the dust of 7th century Arabia. As a reader of these sources, you literally can't help but root for this boy. He wanted nothing more than to participate in a cause he believed in with every fiber of his being, alongside the Prophet. And while he missed out on Badr, his sharp eyes and incredible memory were about to capture some of the most absolutely critical moments in history.
Because his chance finally came at the Battle of Uhud, and wow, it was an absolute roller coaster. First, there's the initial victory. He actually sees the opposing polytheist army flee, even noticing vivid details, like the women lifting their garments as they ran. But then, the devastating turn. Archers abandoning their posts. A commander's explicit warnings, Abdullah bin Jubayr's warnings, just tragically ignored. 70 Muslims martyred. And through all of this complete chaos, Al-Bara was right there. He even heard the taunting shouts of the enemy leader, Abu Sufyan, echoing across the battlefield, repeatedly asking, "Is Muhammad among the people?" It was terrifying, but Al-Bara was absorbing every single detail.
By the time the Battle of Khandaq rolls around, Al-Bara is officially 15 and fully in the fight. And he tells us this: "I saw the messenger of Allah striking with the pickaxe, scooping dirt and carrying it." I want you to think about the power of that imagery for a second. The historical sources clearly note this was a time of immense, paralyzing fear, with massive armies forming a literal alliance against the Muslims. Yet Al-Bara's enduring memory isn't just of the terror, it's of the profound humility of the Prophet, covered in the dirt of the trench, working the pickaxe right alongside his followers. He was right down there in the dirt, side by side with his leader.
And his front row seat to history just kept going, straight into moments of sheer terror, like the stand at Hunayn. This was a chaotic, absolutely devastating ambush. The Muslim forces were caught completely off guard, and in the overwhelming panic, a lot of people fled. But Al-Bara's account cuts right through that chaos to focus on a singular point of steadfastness. He fiercely swore by God to clarify the historical record, stating that while others retreated, the Prophet absolutely did not. He witnessed his leader standing incredibly brave on his white mule, refusing to yield even an inch. Al-Bara's testimony here is absolutely crucial. It immortalized that ultimate bravery when the odds seemed completely impossible. Now, as Al-Bara matured, his experience has expanded way beyond pure combat, right into the realm of diplomacy. Let's look at what happened in Yemen. First, the great commander Khalid bin Walid spent 6 full months there, preaching and inviting the people to Islam, but really with no response. Then, the Prophet sends Ali ibn Abi Talib to take over. Al-Bara, eager to see how this plays out, requests to stay behind and join Ali. So Ali gathers the people, lines them up, and simply reads a letter from the Prophet. And then the climax. The entire Hamdan tribe embraces Islam in a single day,
peacefully. Talk about a game changer. Al-Bara even watched the Prophet fall into prostration out of sheer joy when the letter bearing this news arrived. It's essentially a masterclass in his firsthand experience of how this movement grew, sometimes through long, hard struggle, and sometimes through incredibly sudden, peaceful shifts.
150,000. Let that number sink in for a second. That is the staggering number of Persian troops waiting inside the heavily fortified city of Tustar. During the vast conquest that followed the Prophet's passing, Al-Bara found himself staring down this very fortress. The Muslim army? Well, they had about 30,000 soldiers. So they're facing off against 150,000 troops, besieging them for a year and a half. It was a brutal, bloody, fiercely fought battle, but eventually, the fortress doors were finally breached just hours before the dawn prayer, leading to an overwhelming, historic victory for the Muslim forces.
But here is where things get really profound. Let's look at the aftermath of this epic victory. Because the fighting was at its absolute peak right at dawn, the soldiers missed their morning Fajr prayer on time. Now, whenever Anas bin Malik, a fellow companion who was there in the mud and the blood with Al-Bara, remembered this historic triumph, he would actually weep. He said, "What is Tustar to me? I missed the Fajr prayer, and I would not trade that prayer for the whole world." Let's just pause on that contrast. It perfectly captures the mindset of Al-Bara and his generation. They conquered seemingly impenetrable fortresses, yet their absolute deepest grief was missing a single moment of spiritual connection.
Now, history being history, following these massive outward expansions inevitably brought an era of really complex internal strife. Al-Bara definitely continued his military successes. He was actually instrumental in conquering the city of Ray, but the sources also document how he navigated some incredibly painful internal political conflicts. During the difficult battles of Jamal and Nahrawan, where Muslims were tragically fighting Muslims, Al-Bara took a very principled stance, standing firmly alongside Ali ibn Abi Talib. The historical texts impartially note this alignment, viewing his continued participation as a reflection of his enduring commitment to what he believed was right during some deeply, deeply turbulent times.
And this brilliantly illustrates his next great pivot in life. 305. You see, after a lifetime of marching, fighting, and navigating all those political storms, Al-Bara literally put down his sword. He settled in the city of Kufa, built a home, and dedicated the rest of his life to an entirely different kind of preservation. He became a scholar. This number, 305, represents the staggering number of hadiths, the sayings, actions, and approvals of the Prophet that Al-Bara memorized and formally narrated to the next generation. That incredibly sharp memory of a 14-year-old boy? It had now become the intellectual bedrock of a growing civilization.
And if we look at the breakdown of those 305 narrations, an impressive 22 made it to the absolute highest echelons of authentication, the Sahihain, which are the collections of Al-Bukhari and Muslim. As you can see here, Al-Bukhari alone uniquely recorded 15 of his narrations, Muslim recorded 6, and they shared 1. This permanently cements him not just as a guy who participated in history, but as a primary, heavily relied upon source of prophetic tradition for literally all of Islamic history to follow.
So, you might be wondering, what exactly was he teaching over there in Kufa? Well, he wasn't just narrating battle tactics, that's for sure. He transmitted incredible warmth and spiritual depth. He narrated the deeply comforting news that the Prophet's deceased infant son, Ibrahim, had a wet nurse waiting for him in heaven. He taught the community about the Prophet reciting the chapter of the fig and the olive during the evening Isha prayer. He shared this amazing, deeply spiritual account of a visible cloud of tranquility descending upon a man reading the chapter of Al-Kahf. And he narrated the instruction to elevate the name of the Prophet's city, teaching people to call it Taiba, meaning the good or the pure, instead of its old name Yathrib. He just filled the mosques of Kufa with this gentle wisdom until he passed away around the year 72.
So looking back at all of this, we are left with a profoundly rich dual legacy. On one side, we have Al-Bara the Knight, participating in 14 to 15 major military campaigns, the conqueror of Ray, the warrior who broke the fortress of Tustar. But then, on the exact same coin, we have Al-Bara the scholar, the narrator of 305 hadiths, the foundational teacher in Kufa, the meticulous preserver of the Sunnah. The passion of that heartbroken, rejected 14-year-old boy didn't just build physical empires. It laid down intellectual and spiritual foundations that have lasted well over a millennium.
We've seen how the raw, untamed zeal of a teenager, when it's channeled through discipline, observation, and lifelong dedication, can literally shape history. So looking at his life, it makes you wonder, what legacy will your youthful passions build for the future? How are we channeling the things we care most deeply about today into something that will outlast us tomorrow? It's a pretty profound thought to take away from the incredible, deeply human life of Al-Bara ibn Azib. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer as we navigated these historical sources. I really hope this look at his life sparked your curiosity to dive in and keep learning, keep exploring, and I'll catch you on the next one.